Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. This is Bob White at the Diocese HQ in downtown Jacksonville, and we are here to present the convention financial report, unfortunately about 2 months late. So I want to cover a few things before we get into the deck. First and foremost, I remain very disappointed we were not able to do this in September, mainly because we had pretty much all of the clergy from this diocese and many of the lay leaders of the diocese in the same building, or at least connected. And it was important for everyone to hear that. Didn't happen. We just had some scheduling snafus, and the agenda was probably a little too packed. Be that as it may, we are doing it now to, I am quite certain, without knowing the exact number, a much, much smaller audience. But also, be that as it may, I'm still happy to do it to whomever is interested. We will move on. I want to make a few other summary points. One is that this is largely the presentation that was to be given in September at the convention. However, we have updated a couple of the financial slides because showing you month-end August data in early November would not be very credible. If you know me, I'm all about transparency, and if you don't know me, I'm all about transparency. So if there are detailed questions that go beyond the scope of what we want to present here in a summary presentation, we will take note of those and follow up to the group. The third thing I want to mention is that you'll see a continuing theme in this presentation that the financial results are not particularly good. We run heavy deficits, and I'll speak more to that as we get into it. But this is largely a function of the diocese, and I'm not even talking about the camp. That even kind of piles on a little bit. The diocese has always run deficit numbers, but for 20 years we had pretty active fundraising going on, and that doesn't really exist in any material manner at this time. So you can imagine what the outcome of that is, and we'll get into that more. As I mentioned, the Camp and Conference Center, they are not in these numbers, which is unfortunate. But the good news is they will be. Probably the two things that got me most upset when I took this position, roughly a little less than 2 years ago, was that we were 5 years behind in our audits, which we'll talk about that as well later, and that also we didn't really have any control over Camp Weed and Conference Center's financials. They weren't consolidated into the diocese, which I thought was a mistake, because the diocese owns the Camp and Conference Center. So a lot of people have worked very hard, including the departing executive director, Lori Sojourner, and the Camp Weed board or committee, I'm not sure what they're called, to come up with a projected budget. We're still working on that, and but the important thing is it will be included in 2026 financial reporting as a consolidated view of the business. So that's most of what I wanted to start the meeting with. And the last thing I'll say, I guess, is I think everybody's on mute. So if you have a question, and again, that question hopefully is at the same level of altitude that this presentation is intended for, let us know. If we get into too much detail, we'll just take note of the question and follow up with everybody. So if that's okay, we're going to move on to the presentation deck. The first slide you see, again, since we were doing this in September, and it's still relevant now, is how did we do in 2024, because there was never a meeting subsequent to the end of 2024. So here are the summary financials for last year. You'll note, and this is a continuing theme of mine, that we break out revenue into operating revenue and non-operating revenue. And so what does that mean exactly? It means that operating revenue is primarily, with some additions, but primarily the contributions from the member churches and parishes, the diocesan pledge. It has a lot of names. Some people call it taxes, but that's what that is. The operating expense, again, on this slide, represents only the central office here, the diocese itself. Does it include Camp Weed and Conference Center? And so you'll see a line called operating bottom line. So that's what the house took in and what the house spent. And the result is as you can see, a deficit. The good news for 2024, it's hard to say good news when there's a deficit that you actually incurred, But the good news is the deficit was roughly half of what was expected to be in the budget. So we did lose on an operating basis about $360,000. You now see a concept called non-operating revenue. What is that? Non-operating revenue are not from the operations of the diocese or the individual churches that contribute to the diocese so that it can fulfill its mission goals. What it is it's income that we've taken from investment funds such as the endowment. In the past, that also included the foundation, as well as a fund called Nehemiah, which is solely for real estate and property expenses. That's been tightened up in the last year or so. So we don't take any money now in the foundation, and it's not even presented here because it's a separate entity, has its own board, and we don't technically control what they do. And so there's a lot going on with that it's not really part of this presentation, but I'm sure it will come to fruition at some point. The Nehemiah Fund has also been used to fund some operations, again, in the past, that is also off limits. So the only fund that is now used to support any deficit position the diocesan is the endowment. And we'll get into those balances in a little bit. So if you can see, in 2024, we budgeted, again, with a $740,000 of non-operating revenue, which is not a great thing, a $20,000 surplus, and we actually incurred a $130,000 surplus. So that's how 2024 wrapped up. If you're anything like me, it's kind of like, yeah, whatever, because it's now November of 2025. So we'll talk about that next. Next slide, Tyler. These are the numbers through September 30. We haven't closed October yet. And again, this is the same format with operating revenues, operating expense, and so on and so forth. So thus far this year, and again, this is through September, so it's a little more than a month in the past. We have an operating bottom line of a deficit of $610,000. I'm not assuming everybody understands what all these things mean. That means we spent $610,000 more than we took in from our operating funds. We've taken $408,000 from the endowment, and that leaves us through September with roughly a $200,000 deficit. Our budgeted deficit through the month of October was $275,000. So again, we're better than our budget, but our budget is not something that we could really be very proud of because it was a big deficit. And again, I'm being redundant, but just to make sure everybody understands, who in their right mind would run a business that loses all that money? Well, nobody, but we are at the moment, and we're working very hard, the budget committee, Camp Weed folks, to try to make these deficits less than they are, because we don't have the fundraising pipeline that we used to have. It just doesn't exist, and there's not a development office. There's not any active campaigns going on. That's all obviously for discussion, but it is what it is, and we are where we are, and nobody likes it. I don't like it. I can't run a business, like this financially, but we are working on it very hard. So that's where we are in 2025 through the month of September. I'm not watching Tyler, but if somebody has a question, I guess you'll know. All right, very good. Let's talk about the next slide, and because this has come up in the past. What debt do we have in our finances? Is I think everybody probably knows, and if you don't, you'll know after this brief conversation. The diocese pretty much owns everything. It owns all the property in the diocese. It owns all the buildings, the property, plant, equipment, furniture, fixtures, everything. And those of us who operate in our individual parish churches just use that stuff kind of rent-free, other than the diocesan pledge that we talked about a moment ago. So what about these? What about this debt? We currently have approximately 220. I think it's gone up maybe a couple $100,000 since early September, in what I call short-term loans, and there's probably 6 to 7 diocesan entities, and the range is anywhere from 1 to 4 years. So these are people that might need help with a roof. They might need help with something else, mold remediation, you name it. And it's kind of beyond the scope of their operating income, because they're depending on their parishioners to pay for their operations of their individual churches. So here we are as the diocese trying to make sure that we're not only helping them, which is our goal, our mission goal, but we're also making sure that diocesan assets are properly maintained and in good working order, because it's owned by the diocese, and we want those things to operate into perpetuity and hopefully grow and prosper. So they're assets of the diocese, they're short-term loans. All of these are funded through the Nehemiah Fund. We'll get into that in a little bit. And that fund is solely for property and real estate purposes. So when we help a church with its property needs or expenses, it comes from that fund. If we were to buy property to try to plant a church, it comes from those funds. That's where they come from. So that's the short-term debt that the diocese has. Let's talk about some other debt, and that would be longer-term debt in terms of mortgages. So if a church, and any of you guys are in a church that has done this, you probably know the drill. If you go and get a long-term mortgage to add a building or to refinance the property and do major renovations, and you go get a traditional mortgage, the diocese not only has to sign off on that, the diocese has to guarantee the performance of that loan if the church can't do it within their operating financials. So because of that, we're kind of on the hook, if you will. As of September, the convention date, and to my knowledge, still is the case, we have about $7.5 million of mortgage guarantees relating to 3 different churches. The terms are down to 1 to 5 years. The churches, of course, are responsible for paying for those mortgages in the term of interest and principal payments, as well as any kind of prepayments that they come up with if they're lucky enough to get a gift from their parish. Our balance sheet and all of our audited financials, we'll get to the audits in a minute, all the audited financials have all this information. Our balance sheet conservatively has probably 20 million in net assets. So you could kind of look at this. We've have $7.5 million of long-term leverage, but we have $20 million to support that. And I'd say it's probably a lot more than that. It's kind of like when your property gets assessed for taxes, we all go, well, my property is worth a lot more than that, and it probably is. So property assessed value and market rates are 2 totally different things. So nonetheless, banks have been comfortable loaning this money because of the balance sheet of the diocese. And again, that balance sheet is strong. It's not liquid in terms of cash, but it's strong because of assets that are owned by the diocese. Yeah, question for Keith?
Here it goes.
Hey, you're doing a great job, Bob. I just wanted to update everybody because there was an additional loan guarantee that closed this week, actually. The loan guarantee for St. Paul's by the Sea's wonderful capital campaign closed, I believe, Tuesday. So the guarantee number is now 9.5 million.
Okay. Well, I knew that was happening, but if it just happened Tuesday, I didn't know it closed. But
Yes, sir. I knew you didn't. I just want to make sure that everybody, because you questioned that, I just want to make sure we were clear about that. And thanks for all you're doing, Bob.
Sure.
Yeah.
Matt Marino. Oh, somebody gonna ask it, or?
We did
Oh, I see. How about thanks that we're living off our assets? I know we have taken 800,000 from savings in the last 2 years. When you add in the camp, how long until our endowment is gone? Well, I tell you what, Matt knows I'm in what I call a violent stage of agreement on this notion, which is a happy state, means I 100% agree. And when we get to the investment fund balances, we'll talk about this. But in the near term, we have to seriously, and the budget committee, I think, is adding a lot of pressure and healthy tension, I call it, to the process, because, we can't just operate the way it's always been done when we have no supplemental income coming in from non-operating sources, be those big donations or be those, things that we could monetize. So we couldn't operate at the current rate of deficits, probably for more than a few more years. And I don't have a spreadsheet to show you. I can model that out. It's easy enough. Anybody can play with numbers on a spreadsheet, but this is real stuff. And again, you saw the financials, and the initial budget for 2026 was pretty similar. And so the budget committee has challenged the diocese and the folks at the camp and conference center to not just sharpen the pencils, but just kind of try to create a different paradigm of how we operate. And all that's happening as we speak. So I can't tell you what the outcome of that is, but anybody who has a personal balance sheet or a household balance sheet with their family knows that you can't live by increasing your debt to cover your light bill and your salaries and things like that. It just doesn't add up. So we can talk more about that, but that's kind of my 20,000-foot view of that situation. But I completely agree. And if anybody were to ever ask me if I'm comfortable with the financial position of the diocese, to be blunt, my answer would be hell no. So that's why we're working on it hard. Anything else, or we want to go on? Yeah, so these funds we're talking about. And first, if any of you have paid attention to this kind of thing in the past, you notice there's a fund missing. And I mentioned this earlier. The foundation is a separate corporation, has a separate board of directors. It was, founded for the purpose of supporting the diocese. And some would say, especially the Camp and Conference Center, but it's just a separate organization. So, we're not showing those numbers because they're not even ours. They're not on our balance sheet. However, we do have two other funds. One's the Nehemiah Fund, which I've already discussed. It is for property and real estate. It has in the past been used for operational purposes, but the leadership here at the diocese and the diocesan council and the standing committee and myself, we put a stop to that because that's not its purpose. So that does not fund up. You'll never see that in the budget for the common ministry. You could in Camp Weed because that's property that we own. Therefore, that leads us to the endowment. And the endowment is really the only fund we have left to support the operation of the diocese with non-operating revenues. So you can see on this slide that from 24 to September 30, 25, we've dropped about 590,000 in Nehemiah and about 130,000 in endowment. And if you're good at math and you're paying attention, which I'm sure you all are, you say, well, I'm surprised those variances aren't more negative given the amount of deficits we've had. Well, fortunately, we have an investment house, the Callan family office, that manages our money. And as anybody who's been in the market for the last 12 to 18 months knows, if you've invested well, you've done well. So our returns have been pretty good. And so that offsets somewhat the deficits that we're running on an operating basis. So otherwise, if this had been a down market year, these numbers would be much more ugly. And that was a big discussion topic at the last budget committee because, some were saying that, well, we're going to have another 12 or 13% return year in 2026. And it's like, whoa. Nobody knows that. And we should probably go back down to, a 6 or 7% assumption. And if you've been involved in any kind of endowment or foundation work, you know that the whole idea is to take the interest and throw that off into income for whoever you support and keep the corpus or the balance of the fund relatively intact. And so most funds, I know at my church, we are fortunate to have a couple of trusts that unfortunately we take into income. That's a different story. That their assumption usually is about 4.5%. And if they do better than that, you get an overage check. So these numbers could be a lot worse, but God bless the markets because in our current condition, that's been very helpful. So these are the funds that, two of the questions, one from Annette Steins and also Matt Marino brought up. This is what's supporting just the endowment, by the way, which is currently about 3.9 million as of September anyway. That's what's supporting these deficits. So if we're going to run, a $600,000 deficit at the diocesan office and another in the Camp and Conference Center is hoping that we can contribute $250 a year, that's another. So now you're up to 800. Well, 3.88 million divided by 800,000 doesn't yield a very long curve. So this is why we are beating on the numbers and trying to rethink how we can operate. I see another question. It's also from, this one's from Paul Arrington. Is Camp Weed, in fact, being supported from the endowment or from where? Uh, yes, Camp Weed, is our biggest mission if you think about it. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and again, for the first time, I guess in a long time, certainly in my tenure, we have a budget for Camp Weed, and they are reporting against that budget, and we'll include those in our financials in 2026. But in their current budget, and I'm going off of memory from a few weeks ago at our last meeting, their current budget assumed, I think, a 250-ish thousand dollar contribution from the diocese, which if you've been listening to what I've been saying, you realize that we don't have that money to give them. And I think they're also assuming $200,000 on fundraising on their own. So nor do I exactly, and I'm not being a negative Bobby here. I don't know where they're going to get that money because they don't have active fundraising or development initiatives going on either. So they're assuming $450,000 ish. Again, we're 20,000 feet here of assistance, and they're still slightly negative even with those gifts. So uh, it struggles as well. And Camp Weed in particular is a place in the past, so I'm told, so this is hearsay, I wasn't there, that our former bishop was effective at raising money to plug holes for Camp Weed. And again, none of that money raising is happening at this time. I also see another question from Matt. We talk about the reality that our staff and budget were designed when we had 12,000 of fiscal pay and sitting in church on Sunday. We now have 7,000 of us and never have made the 42% budget cut. Uh, we could talk about it. That's what the budget committee is talking about. And it's reality, like you say, it's real life, and it affects people if we were to make drastic changes. And that's what we're working on. And I know several of us, including me and Keith, who has the responsibility of running this place, are trying to point out that this is the way we've always done it. Not going to work. Uh, or if we do it that way, it'll work. It'll work for a few years. And I think in my own mind, this is just my opinion. I don't particularly think we want to present to a potential new bishop that, we're a financial wreck. We got to show that we're doing things to make progress and to reverse course on this big ship. Uh, okay. And Annette said if people generationally weren't giving at the same levels as their parents or grandparents did. I don't have that research, but that could definitely be true. Keith, go ahead.
Thanks. Again, you're doing a great job, Bob, and we so appreciate it. I wanted to just help answer a couple
Well,
of questions. One to Paul, the endowment is not directly like directly from the endowment itself supporting Camp Weed, but Diocesan Council has this year approved use of the endowment. So I guess the endowment is supporting Camp Weed to the tune of $250,000. So the answer, Paul, is yes. The Camp Weed is supported through the work of the Diocesan Council this calendar and fiscal
so
year in the amount of $250,000. And one other thing I want to just point out is that when we speak of the operating expenses include all of the expenses of the missions of the diocese in addition to the diocesan office. So that includes the Hispanic ministry, the urban ministry in Jacksonville, the Grace Mission Ministry in Tallahassee, all of the collegiate support. So it's not just the diocesan office; it's everything except Camp We is included in operating expenses. Thanks. Oh, and actually, to Annette's last comment, very interestingly, our diocesan congregational pledges, which are based on the revenue of our congregations, actually have, while they're not surging hugely, they actually have continued to rise both pre and post COVID, probably by about, I would guess, 5% or more a year, but not, again, not a surge, but it's very interesting to see that our congregational pledges and so therefore congregational revenue, even though, as Father Matt indicates, attendance is down, the funds coming in from our congregations have continued to rise every year.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Keith. And
Sure.
again, we can provide as much detail when it gets a little more refined of all the expenses once the budget committee kind of gets a little further down the track, and that's going to be sooner rather than later, given that it's November of 2025. Okay, a few other notes that I wanted to point out in September. We've had kind of a passive finance and investment committee, and that's no uh, criticism or insult to anybody that's been on it in the past. It's become a lot more active, and we've kind of created more structure around it, and have added some members. And so that group will continue to be responsible for recommending to the diocesan council, which again, I think everybody knows what that is, but the diocesan council is essentially the vestry for the diocese, who makes these ultimate financial decisions. We're trying to clean up the pipeline between the finance committee and the diocesan council when a funding need comes in, that we have a chance to go through it before they see it, because that's not always been the case in the past. So that's actually going quite well in my humble opinion, including we're finalizing a new investment policy for how we operate with our investment management firm. So we are making strides. We've talked about the audits. That was one of two things I mentioned in my introduction that kind of blew my mind when I took this job 20 months ago. That we were pretty much 5 years behind in audits, which it's not good. Somebody even asked recently, well, do we need to do them? And it's kind of like, that was a scary question. And if you're on the call, sorry, but it was a scary question, because absolutely you need to do it. All of our churches and all of the parishioners of all of our churches and everybody in the diocese needs to be confident that we're running a ship that's been audited, and conclusions have been made that there are no material weaknesses in terms of internal controls or financial reporting. The good news is when I started in 2020, early 2024, we had not quite finished 2019 audit. We've since that time done 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And we are fervently working here at the diocese on 2024. And then we will get to work on 2025, probably early summer of 2026, which is more on schedule. You typically would complete the prior year audit, any time from the late first quarter to late second quarter. So that has been a Herculean effort, and it will put us on a much better foundation. I don't know why that happened, but it did. So that's all I can say about that. And we've talked already about the working with the Camp Weed and Conservative Conference Center team, which is a different team now, at least at the leadership level, and the people that are on the committee. I know Cortland Irick, Bob White, not me, a different Bob White, a more famous Bob White, and probably others that I don't know about are on that group. And we actually have real numbers for the first time in a long time. And again, that's highly necessary because they run deficits. And so when we're attacking how we fix these deficits, be it through cutting budgets or raising funds or even borrowing money, if we decided to do that, which I'm not suggesting we should, we need to understand the entire puzzle and not just one piece of it. So really, that was what I had planned to present in September, and then some, I imagine, with some updated financials. And if there are any more questions, happy to take them. We have a lot of work to do. Everybody knows that, and that work is happening in earnest. And at least I can give you my again 20, maybe it's 21 months since I've been a treasurer, that I can tell you in these 21 months I'm seeing a lot more attention to detail, a lot more pressing questions, and a lot more just being in the present with respect to what's going on and what needs to be done to continue this operation. So that's the good news, but the bad news is we still have a lot of work to do. Those were my remarks. I see another question. Yeah, Matt, I have another question. I've written a letter to the diocesan council asking to urge the budget committee engaging a 3-year move to a balanced budget. That letter, Matt, has been discussed at the budget committee, and there are I don't want to say it's unanimous, but I know there are many people on that committee that agree, uh, with your recommendation or even maybe a stronger one to get that done. Because again, we've had a lot of strife in our diocese. Everybody knows that. I don't need to belabor that. And we haven't had a bishop in 2 years, and we're working to get one. But it'd be nice if that person didn't have to spend their first entire year or two, cleaning up. That's our job. And so that letter has been sent. Okay. Annette says she hasn't seen it and she's on DC. Keith would have to address that. I don't know about that. I can only say because I was there that it was discussed uh at the budget committee meeting. I'm not aware of whether it was received by the diocesan council. I received it because I was one of the people it was addressed to. Go ahead, Keith.
Hey, yes, thanks, Bob. Father Matt, I am sorry. I was not a direct recipient of that letter. It was forwarded to me by the budget committee. Um, I thought I remembered, and I apologize if this is not the case, that you actually emailed it yourself to all of the recipients that you intended to receive it. I'll go back and find that letter this morning and make sure that it goes to all of Diocesan Council. But again, I was not a recipient or a copy originally. It was forwarded to me, and I may have made the mistake when I received it of thinking that you had sent it to everybody you meant to receive it. But I'll go back again and make sure it goes out today to all of Diocesan Council. I see you say that you thought that would get it done. I don't know, but I'll again I'll make sure it goes out to all the Diocesan Council because I thought I remembered that it had gone to a broader audience than just those three folks. But I'll do that today, actually right now.
Any more questions? Again, sorry this was so late vis-a-vis the intended date of September, but we got it done, and hopefully everybody is a little bit more aware now of where we are financially and what we're trying to do to continue making improvements and meet the challenges head on. If there's no questions, I am done. Thank you for your time.
Thanks again, Bob.
Sure.